Details of a US 21-point plan to end the conflict in Gaza have been emerging while we're on air this morning. The plan's been seen by the Times of Israel, and it would see the return of Israeli hostages, grant amnesty for Hamas members committed to peace, and see Gaza governed temporarily by a transitional government. And that last point has a strong resemblance to plans already laid out by Sir Tony Blair, who is reportedly in talks to lead this transitional authority. So how confident can we be about this peace deal? Let's speak to Chris Doyle, who's the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. Morning, Chris.
Good morning, Callum.
I think worth reflecting, first of all, that this 21-point plan that we're reporting on this morning is just the latest in over a dozen proposals from government and government-sponsored think tanks for a day after, as it's referred to in Gaza, when the conflict ends. Does this one feel more feasible? Does the timing feel more realistic? How would you assess where we find ourselves this Saturday morning?
Well, at some point, all these horrors, what's going on in Gaza has to come to an end. And it would appear there's a little bit more of a momentum in that this clearly has the White House all over it, its imprimatur and so forth. So in terms of getting the United States on board, it's certainly there. What I think is, there are lots of things that are not yet clear. To what extent there will be any Palestinian buy-in to this, to what extent that Hamas, which has had its leadership largely taken out, so who's agreeing to this, will they be able to agree to it as well? And indeed, what about the Israeli government? Because the Israeli government, of course, is a coalition. There are things in here that many ministers in that coalition will not agree to. And therefore, you have to wonder as to whether that coalition will survive all of this. So I think one can be hopeful that at least some diplomacy is going on. And bearing in mind that the Israeli government recently was bombing the Hamas negotiating team in Doha, one has to see this as a perhaps faint welcome. But as we get details of this plan, there are still so many unanswered questions. Much of it is very vague. It's not very clear as to the speed and stages of any Israeli withdrawal out of Gaza. I think that will be something that Palestinians will be very anxious to see. It's not at all clear as to whether UN agencies will be allowed to operate in Gaza to get the aid in at the sort of scale that's necessary.
Yeah, and I can't help but wonder if the establishment of the Gaza humanitarian effort that sort of superseded is the wrong word, but that was established as a kind of alternative almost to the UN's efforts in Gaza, if that actually may have been a step towards this plan's implementation, that there is an alternative to the UN that is operating within the territory.
Well, there isn't a viable alternative, and it's been an utter failure. We have seen, of course, that they've come up like death traps, really, where you have seen, now over 1,000 people killed in and around those areas as Palestinians are corralled, starving into them. The only way to address the famine that has broken out in much of Gaza is to allow, which should have happened the whole way through, UN agencies, humanitarian agencies, free and unimpeded access. So all of that. And then the role of external actors.
Yes.
I mean, I think this is also really important. I mean, it must be Palestinian-led administration. And to be quite honest, the idea that Sir Tony Blair, whose record in the Middle East is not one to be proud of. One thinks of the Iraq War 2003 and its subsequent occupation, but also his 8 years as the Middle East Quartet envoy, which was not studied with success. He does not have the confidence and trust of Palestinians. They will see him as somebody who represents American and Israeli Western interests, and not their hopes and aspirations.
So I just want to jump in, Chris, because I want to continue talking about Sir Tony Blair, but I just think adding context for our listeners who are joining us this morning is important, because this 21-point plan, point 9 of it is this: Gaza will be governed by a temporary transitional government of Palestinian technocrats who will be responsible for providing day-to-day services for the people of the Strip. The committee will be supervised by a new international body established by the US in consultation with Arab and European partners, it will establish a framework for funding the redevelopment of Gaza until the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform programme. Now, the analysis of this is that borrows heavily, quote, from former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair's plan for ending the war. And it's known, isn't it, that Blair and former White House senior advisor Jared Kushner, let me get this right, son-in-law of President Trump, have been working on this Gaza file for months while advising the Trump administration as well. So that's the context under which Blair could take this on. I suppose that he would head this sort of transitional authority or oversee it to some extent.
Yeah. And I mean, note the word supervise. I mean, it's not advise. This is a piece of territory, Gaza, that is actually meant to be part of the Palestinian state that Britain has just recognised. Palestinians have been under occupation for decades. So it is, the idea that some Western authority comes in, it's very colonial era. I mean, one wonders whether, Tony Blair will be strolling around, the Gaza Strip with some sort of safari helmet. Much of the media has referred to him as the, potential governor of Gaza. I mean, we have to get away from this. The people who run Gaza should be Palestinians. Those involved in advising them should be at least Arabic speaking, with an intimate knowledge of how Gazan Palestinian society works, operates, its strengths and weaknesses. So this is really should be seen as a non-starter. I mean, it's not totally clear, of course, whether Blair himself wishes to do it. But if he does wish to do it, it also has to be absolutely full-time. You can't do this on some sort of part-time ad hoc basis, as he did with the Quartet envoy.
I do wonder if Chris, if this is going to be, in your view, if this is the least worst option. I mentioned that we've seen dozens of proposals, one of which, of course, lest we forget, was President Trump's plan to establish the Gaza Riviera. He had obviously, months ago, advocated exiling people from Gaza and building this Riviera. Do you remember there was an AI picture of it as well? This was back in February. And so the suggestion around Blair's proposals is that there would be a UN mandate to be a kind of political and legal authority for potentially 5 years, that he would have a secretariat of up to 25 people and chair a 7-person board to oversee an executive body running the country. I mean, it sounds like some sort of establishing of a corporation almost, and Gulf states would apparently pay for that.
Well, indeed. I mean, I think one really has to see the detail of how all of that would work. But the other thing that's really noticeable is that it bows to the Israeli demand that the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah has no authority within the Gaza Strip. And that continues the age-old plan to divide the West Bank and Gaza.
Well, I think there was a suggestion in here for the two to almost be united under this plan for a kind of Palestinian state.
Well, I'm still trying to familiarize myself with all the details that we've just seen. But, there is an authority in Gaza, in Ramallah, and that should be, the way forward as part of a Palestinian state. But it also should be one, of course, that should be reformed. We really do need to see, I cannot stress, the detail in this. Yes, it's much better than the Trump proposal, which was laughable, but it's still, short of what the sort of options for Gaza should be. I think there's some things in it that have been around in every proposal, and one understands that Hamas will not govern, that the hostages will all get released. But what happens to all those Palestinian detainees, thousands that were taken are held without trial? There is so much in here. Who's going to stomp up, all the funds, all of this? There is so much work to be done. But I think the first step is that absolutely everybody concretely agrees to this. And we work out further detail. If it does mean, of course, that we get to a ceasefire, if we get to the end of the bombing, if we get to the end of starvation, and of course, that's going to be really welcome news. But we've had so many false dawns, I don't want to get everybody's hopes up too early.
Yeah. Chris, it's good to get your analysis on this, and appreciate it's a developing situation. So thank you very much. That is Chris Doyle, who is the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding.